Well, listen, Janet, I really wanted to kind of set the tone for this interview by honestly doing a wellness check. How are you feeling? How are you doing during this time?
For me, I think it's like any, artist whose work is seen as activism. I think for
Mm.
me, I've really just been going deep into the thoughts and kind of works of the people who came before me,
Mm.
the people who came before us, who really were fighting this fight for a very long time and kind of laid the groundwork for us. And so, the works of James Baldwin and Audre Lorde, are just two of the few that I kind of look to, and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Angela Davis, who's still here with us.
Yeah.
Being able to share their works on my social to, maybe new activists or new voices who may not quite know that these people existed and that we're not the first to go through something like this. And so for me, that brings a lot of comfort, is sharing those kind of words of encouragement and a blueprint for how we should move forward.
And it's so needed. I think that's so important too, because as you just pointed out, I feel like, George Floyd's death and all the protests that have followed since have really awakened the country. And for a lot of people, they're stepping into activism for the first time. But of course, the problems that exist in this country have existed long before George Floyd's death. There's obvious parallels between the Black Lives Matter movement right now and honestly Stonewall and the gay rights movement, years ago. Have you drawn those same comparisons?
Oh, completely. I think that for me at least, there's never been a sense of celebrating pride without really thinking about, our foremothers and forebears who were there that night, who
Yeah.
literally, Stonewall was one of the only safe spaces where LGBTQ people could come and gather in community. Back then I think a lot of young people forget, and maybe even people of my generation too, forget that, you were an outlaw if you were trans or queer,
Hmm.
that people you were got in trouble for not having two items of gender appropriate clothing, and that alone could lend you to be put into jail. And so on that fateful night in 1969, when they uprise together to say, we're tired of this policing, we're not going to take another raid on our lives, we're not going to be surveillance anymore. When they fought back, that was the igniting of the change for LGBTQ people. And largely that charge was led by people of color, poor folk who lived on the street, trans women, drag queens, butch lesbians who were
Yeah.
out there. And they were fighting back because they were the ones who were often most policed, most surveillance, most put into jails. And so I think I always have that connective tissue to our really radical roots as an LGBTQ movement.
And among those trans pioneers and those LGBTQ advocates was Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. Maybe you could speak to a little bit about their legacy and what they signify and what they mean to the LGBTQ plus movement today.
Yeah, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were there that night. They were in community, they were gathering together, and they wouldn't take it anymore. They knew that they needed to fight for their lives, or they were going to live under this kind of surveillance for the rest of their lives. And I think that monumental self-sacrifice, the fact that you would literally put your body and your own well-being on the line for the collective good, I think has created a model for activism across all movements. And I think that one of the great things about them being recentered as a part of the narrative, that they picked up the brick or the Molotov cocktail, that they were the ones out there in front of the police that night fighting back for their lives, that has created, this intersectional approach to how we should do activism, that we really put those who are the most marginalized, people of color, trans and gender nonconforming people, women, disabled folks, undocumented folks at the center of our movements. Because if they are centered and celebrated and vaunted, we then, all of us, the people, are celebrated, centered, and vaunted.
We're confronting and exposing the inequalities in this country that have existed for a really long time, and it's hard to take in. What message do you have, particularly for the transgender community who are struggling during this time?
I think my biggest thing is just, remember who you are. You know exactly who you are. Uplift and recenter the narrative, the fact that you come from trans and gender nonconforming folk who were there that fateful night in 1969 at Stonewall, that we helped ignite this movement and we deserve space in this movement, and that this movement is also ours. And so what I would say to them in this time period is to refocus yourself in this, to think about the narrative of where you've come from and where we've come from, and to realize that starting exactly where you are at your kitchen table with your family, your community, your chosen loved ones, that you have those conversations there, and then from there you build more and more and more. To be an activist or to be a co-conspirator in our movement.
An accomplice almost.
Yeah, yes, an accomplice, exactly.
Yeah.
We have to be active, and we have to be consistent, and we have to do the uncomfortable work of checking and challenging conversations that at times can seem maybe a little basic. And so I think I would encourage them to mess up those conversations and to insert yourself in them, and to do it, of course, knowing that your own self-care and safety is of utter priority.
This is who I truly am. I see that.
We got to talk about Pose, because when I watched Kandis' death, her murder really, in season 2, I mean, I was a mess. And I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of people, a lot of viewers who watched that show. Why was it so important to tell that story? And what was it like for you to have played such a huge part in that?
It was one of the hardest scripts to have written, really. Was Never Knew Love Like This Before, which really starred Angelica Ross as Kandi, and really tells her story of wanting to be truly seen as she saw herself. She saw herself as a star. And as we saw throughout our series, her great antagonist most times was Billy Porter's character, Pray Tell. And so I think that the culmination of her murder, of her family, her sisters finding her no longer there, really spoke and really centered us in terms of our mission. Ryan Murphy and I wrote that script together, and it really was to bring a spotlight on the epidemic of violence that surrounds the lives of Black and brown trans women globally, not just in the United States. And so for us, we wanted to, of course, you had to lose a character that was so special and so dynamic, and to say goodbye to Kandi was so hard. But I think giving her the justice of being able to speak from the other side, to speak her truth, to right the wrongs done against her, and to also to forgive her parents who may not have always made the right choices. And I know for a lot of LGBTQ people, the scene with Kandi and her parents was cathartic for so many of us who had to struggle with that, had to struggle with who we knew ourselves to be and the people we came from. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that made that script and that episode so special, beyond Angelica's, tour de force performance. And, the uplifting nature of what Pose is, it's about family. And so in the end, she got her trophy. She got her 10s across the board by, singing, lip syncing that beautiful song, and then finally being, laid to rest.
That was such an amazing way to end that episode too, to also experience, Black joy. And just, I was playing that song on repeat after that episode, Janet. You guys really did a number on me. It's hard to shake that episode, so.
That song has a whole new
it really does.
Life now, because it's almost like you want to scream, dance, jump for joy, and cry at the same time. It's like.
That is exactly right. That's how I felt. I still feel that way. You guys were actually in the middle of filming season 3 right before production was halted because of COVID. Do you have any idea when you guys will be back into production, what that timeline looks like?
Well, we're still, the writers, we never stopped working. So, we're still refocusing scripts, changing things because of this whole new world, which is going to require us to spend more time and to be even more thoughtful about the scenes that we need, about the amount of people that can be on a set. And so our whole world is changing in this way. And so for us as producers and writers, we just want to tell the best possible story in the safest way. And so for us, of course, the priority of the health of our crew and our cast is of utmost importance. But, we will go back, and we will be doing it. Hopefully, when New York is bouncing back, we get to go back to that great city and tell these super important, stories.
Hands across the board. Oh, Jesus. Y'all done wore me out on this evening. Y'all done wore me out.
What kind of changes are you guys, or how do you see that the coronavirus pandemic, once we're on the other side of it, will impact your production in particular? Because I read a report that there might be no kissing scenes or any ballroom scenes imposed. Is there any truth to that?
No, we're definitely going to have ballroom scenes. There's going to be love making and love and hugs and all that stuff. I think we just have to figure out the best ways of filming that. You know, I know that we're coming up with contingency plans in terms of our ball sequences, which would be the ones that are the hardest for us to shoot because historically, from the very first pilot until, you know, I got shut down directing the season 3 premiere of Pose, our ball scenes, you know, there's 300 people in a room. And there's a lot of energy and a lot of, you have to be close and you have to have all that stuff. So I think we're figuring out creative ways with the use of visual effects, with the use of different kinds of staging to be able to keep the cast and also our background actors safe. You know, we can't forget that, you know, our background actors are real life, you know, trans and queer LGBTQ people living in the Bronx and in Harlem and in Brooklyn. And so they are more at risk, you know, and also, you know, compromised. So we're thinking about creative ways of making sure that we can still get those great, glamorous, glorious, celebratory shots while also keeping everyone safe. So for us, that's the biggest challenge is thinking through that. I think everything else with like 1 to 2 to 3 people in a scene will be easy. We're figure out how we're going to do our dinner table scenes now. There's usually 8 people around that funky Evangelista table. But thankfully for the premiere, we already shot all of that. So I'm like, praise Jesus.
So one done. Good. I know it's going to be a challenge because it's also, you can't have Pose without those ballroom scenes. So I know you guys have your work cut out for you.
This is our screenwriter, Archie Coleman. Pleasure to meet you.
You're colored. I love it.
You know, and you definitely tackled those stories head on, especially in all your work. But in Hollywood, I know that you had co-wrote 2 episodes that specifically address, you know, Black issues in the entertainment industry. How would you say those issues that played out on Hollywood are similar to today?
Yeah, there was no real big time jump that I really needed to make in order to talk about, you know, what it means to be, say, a Black screenwriter or a Black woman in front of the camera. Those were things that I knew on an intimate level just from my own experiences. And so I think what was so great about Hollywood is that we were able to shed light in an entertaining way about the disparities that are there in terms of opportunities for folks of color in Hollywood and how the system initially wasn't built for, say, a starlet like Camille, played by Laura Harrier, or a Black out gay screenwriter like Archie, played by Jeremy Pope. You know, for me, I wanted to make sure that I used those characters and their journeys and struggles and triumphs to be able to allow other people who are dreaming of being a part of this world to see that it has always been that way and that this is a new possibility for futures by having this kind of fantastical revisionist history of it all without forgetting the actual fights that had to be won and battled in order to get to where we need to go.
Absolutely.
This studio is risking everything.
We're already seeing pushback.
And suddenly, everything goes dark again.
What has it meant to have the support of someone like Ryan Murphy in your pursuit of truth and representation on TV?
To have a mentor like Ryan has just been a huge gift. You know, he really just dropped into my life. I had just finished doing the book tour for my second book, Surpassing Certainty, when he requested a meeting for me. With me, and I didn't know what the meeting was about. I had no idea about Pose. I didn't read the Hollywood trades. I was very much a novice. And so when he told me about this idea, I just knew that it was important, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of crafting those women's stories. And so I went on that gut. You know, I left New York City, which was the only city that I've really known and felt safe in being myself. And I moved to Los Angeles and started writing on that show a week later after that meeting. And he's changed my life. He's been such a great mentor. He's been such a great guide. He's been, talk about being an ally, a powerful white ally, to be someone who has leveraged his own privileges and his own access into these spaces to say, this is a young woman you all need to be paying attention to. She's going to change the world. I'm telling you now. And he gave me opportunities and he supported me through those opportunities, from Hollywood and Pose to Politician and Janet Cook, which he's executive producing. So it's been great to have someone who champions me and believes in me. But I think for other, folk who have privilege, I think Ryan is a great example of being someone of power who wields that power to bring other people in.
That's why I need more stuff from you guys. I need more. I just can't get enough. I've been such a huge fan, and obviously what you guys are doing is such important work. And so it was important for us that we talk to you specifically, especially in light of everything going on. So Jana, I have to thank you 1,000 times over for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.